Well, I feel like we've got the dream team of advisor experience here in the house. We're going to be talking about some fun things today, specifically regarding advisor education. You know, we had dinner last night. You weren't there. Sorry, you missed a whole lot of super good chicken wings over at McCoy's. And we just had an interesting beginning of a discussion talking about how advisors get educated, right? And we've all been in this business for how long? Well,
Sometimes
collectively. Let's not...
Over 100 years.
I think it was over 110.
110, yeah.
110 years. And, you know, having this discussion, we have very similar backgrounds in how we came into the business, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's kind of sad if you think about how advisors get educated, right?
It can be.
Yeah. Why?
There's no blueprint for one solution.
You mean for how we do our business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you think back, like, how did you learn to be an advisor?
Started with the test, right? You had to pass the state.
Get a license.
The state bar, the license. You had to study for them. Typically at home you did this, or maybe you took a online course, but that's how it started for me.
Or the 3-day crash course.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or the crash, and then you go take the test right afterwards. So there wasn't a whole lot of background that you did, say, schooling or whatever it was. It was just basically the same test everybody had to take.
Yeah.
You had to pass it.
Mm-hmm. I probably should have started with this, and I apologize. But Bruce, you're up in New Hampshire, been in the business for a heck of a long time. Kevin, Michigan, Pinconning, and then Ryan, where at in Michigan again?
Port Huron.
We're Michigangsters.
Mr. Gangsters. And then obviously we're right here in Charlotte. But yeah, I totally agree. I feel like, you know, when I first got into this business, you know, what was interesting to me is I thought, you know, I passed my tests. I was teamed up with another advisor at Morgan Stanley. That's where I'd started my career. And, you know, I was taught just to get on the phone, and that when I got clients in the office, this older advisor was going to help me close business. But I wasn't taught anything. Just, hey, get on the phone. Here's a script. Go.
Smile and dial.
Yep. Learn from them.
Yeah,
that was your training. You learned from somebody who'd been in the business a long time, and hopefully it was the right way.
Yeah. That was rough.
Yeah.
Dialing for dollars.
Man, I got hung up on so many times. I was a cold call cowboy.
Yeah.
I mean, I must have made, 300 dials a day on average every day. Because I didn't know anybody in the business.
Wow.
It was hard. You know, got used to just no, click, hang up. Hey, my name is click.
Yep.
And next one. And then it got automated where it would keep ringing until somebody answered. And you didn't have to worry about do not call lists and all that stuff because you had to check your list and all that stuff. And it was rough there for a while. Okay, so you've been in the business a few years. How do you know, you're not necessarily teamed up with an advisor anymore, or maybe you are, but like, when did we really learn how to be, or what were we taught as an advisor?
Well, I mean, the training I know I got when I first started was in a captive agency. So it was really more geared toward the product knowledge and how to sell. It wasn't really about the client, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know that I really learned how to advise when I first started. I was really learning how to do something else.
How to make the bottom line of your agency look better.
Sure.
So you were taught you have to sell X amount of life insurance, basically X amount of investments. That was the primary goal, but you weren't really taught the right way to go about
building a plan.
Building a plan, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it was just a product. A product fixed everything in their mind.
I remember, man, early on, they were going over so many different products, and I was like amazed. And I looking back, you know, the mutual fund guys or the annuity guys would come into the office and, you know, in Morgan Stanley, we had these beautiful offices, and they'd go present up top and they'd talk to you with their business card. Hey, so-and-so at BlackRock or so-and-so at Prudential. Just let me know, you want to do a client event? I'll cover it. You know, they'd throw money around like it was nothing. I'm like, man, you'll pay for me to do an event? Like, how do I get people there? Oh, I'll help you you have clients, you know? And all they're trying to do is buy our business, right?
Sure.
And I was like amazed. Like, these guys would talk about their products. Like, they would be magical things to fix anybody's problem. And I'm green behind the ears. I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
It's that good?
Right.
And I'm like just drinking the Kool-Aid.
I think the way we were taught in the agency system was what made money for the company was the best thing you could do for yourself and the client, prospective client. It wasn't the way we teach today. We were just doing rote memorization of maybe a sales track, doing a simple demonstration for someone, and then turning around and say, wouldn't that fit your situation nicely? And then you progress from there.
And then they start, dangling the whole like, hey, you want to go to Hawaii?
Yes.
Like the achievement award, like, hey, you want to be at the president's table or whatever, like
Front and center.
Front and center.
Yeah.
Like you can.
By the way, if you sell 20 of these before the end of next month, right?
It's totally how it was.
You get a new pair of roller skates.
Or a watch, or a trip, or a car. I mean, whatever it was. I mean, sometimes the bigger the prize, the harder it was to achieve. But they were always dangling something.
It was always sales driven.
Very.
It was always sales driven. It was never, or product driven. It was always that way.
Right.
Okay. So we've all had that same experience. And we're not necessarily saying, well, looking back, I think that was terrible. So I am saying that was a horrible way.
It was.
Introduction into be a financial advisor.
Yep.
But when did you as an individual, like, or how did we actually learn how to plan, like at those firms, Morgan Stanley or wherever you were? How did you actually learn how to plan?
I think in my case, the first behavioral science,
or what were you taught?
The first behavioral science course that they taught was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we first learned to think in a more behavioral type of way, which would benefit the communication process with the client. And then as that evolved, they got into very, very advanced, what they thought at the time was advanced financial planning, where they prepared a 60-page document of numbers and statements that not an actuary really understood. And we were supposed to impress people with how much knowledge we had by giving them this document and handing it to them in a leather binder. And we were the greatest thing since sliced bread ever.
Oh, that's so funny.
Wow.
You actually reminded me at Morgan Stanley, we had, I can't remember the name of the software, but it was the same thing. It would take, almost like a half a day to gather all the information you need. And it was a 3-inch binder of leather. It had Morgan Stanley. It was black. Actually, I have 3 in the office. I wish I remember. I brought it in here. And I would be so proud. I couldn't interpret probably but 6 pages in the dang thing. But I was like, look at the plan that we put together. It was a piece of software. You just sat there all day, just typing in information.
And that was going to make you the best planner in the world.
And I knew 6 pages.
Yeah.
And if you got really good, then you went to an advanced marketing team inside the captive agency. You were at,
Sure.
and they showed you and bedazzled you with all these other graphs and numbers that made it even look better. So you had to get to that point so you could graduate to
it.
them. Yeah.
Oh, what's funny about that is the advanced planning or advanced strategy.
Yeah.
Even now and 20 years in, every time I talk to an advisor and like, oh yeah, we did some advanced planning. I'm like, what? Oh, you sold a product.
Yes.
Right.
So, because all advanced planning really means is, hey, I got this cool product that we like to talk about this one situation that really fits in. That's all that means.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So for me personally, when I was early on in my career, I was just taught through a piece of software. It was, that big financial stuff that we had talked about. I read and I talked to other financial advisors, and I learned very quickly I didn't know what I was doing. And I feel like I got burned out, and I'll never forget the day that I was kind of done being a financial advisor, sitting in a boardroom with a bunch of financial advisors, huge room, and there must have been, 40, 30 advisors in there.
I remember this story.
And they were all talking about, working with clients and making money and margins.
Yeah.
And this one guy was sitting real close to me. It was before the meeting started. And he's just bragging about, man, I made this much money when they bought it. I made this much money when they sold it. And the client just broke even, but I I got paid.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and I'm just like, man, this business it's not for me.
Yeah.
Like, I can't buy into this. I'm not out for me. I got to feel like I went to school to become a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm just not wired this way. Like, yeah, I want to make money. Don't get me wrong, but not like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm done. And then, I got into the private side. God pulled me to another side of this business, and I saw how different it could be. But the challenge, I think, whether you're on the big brother broker side or if you're on the independent side, is really education. And more importantly, I think for the client's fear, it's how do you find that advisor that really knows or understands or how to plan, and how do they know what they're doing is good? Like, how did we get to that point?
Oh, it's quite a journey. It's a long
That's assuming
answer.
that we're amazing at what we do.
That
I shouldn't do that.
goes without saying.
We're always looking for something, right?
Mhm.
From day one, my many years, I'm looking for something to help the client that is better, more educational, more understandable, and is truly in their best interest.
So go back to the early days though, and like, how were you taught if a product was suitable in the early days?
It was on the pyramid. Remember the pyramid planning? You take the base and then you work your way up. That's how we were taught.
You built it on a solid
Foundation, yep.
And then as the people advanced up the pyramid, you introduced them to mutual funds. There were no ETFs
That was the
at
guide.
that time.
That was
Yep.
the guide.
That was the guide.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
pyramid.
And
Interesting. I don't remember the pyramid.
And the primary focus was always, if you're captive, life insurance first, right? Because it was all about, life insurance, annuities second,
Mhm.
and then mutual funds, and work your way up the stair.
And one of the things that we talked about last night, specifically on this, was it was suitable as long as we were allowed to sell it.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So if it was on a do not sell list, whether it was a good or bad product, that just probably means they didn't get paid a whole lot or whatever. And we're like, hey, we can't sell these, or you have to get special permission to sell these. But
Right.
these, almost in any situation, feel
Fit.
free.
They fit every
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, just go ahead,
Yeah,
just sell it.
Yep.
And I feel like we're beating the living daylights out of how we grew up in this business. But looking back, like, I hate how I was taught to be or actually the lack of teaching how to be a financial advisor and take care of
Likewise.
a client.
Right.
It was all product. And if you worked in a captive agency, it was always their products were the
Correct.
best, right? And then if they brought in another vendor, it was very rarely.
So
in a
help me
captive,
understand, what is a captive agency again?
where you can only sell what they offer.
So
if
there's
you-
certain companies out there that they have their
They have
brand.
their own product
Yeah,
line.
your own
That is a
product line.
captive agency.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's where I began to cut my teeth.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, for me, I came in not knowing anything. I came from a completely different industry into this. And so I thought that was everything that was available. And when you found out the world was bigger, because I started talking to other people and they're like, oh, no, there's all this other things out here you can learn. That's when I knew I had to switch, because I knew there was better things
Yeah,
for the clients.
I think there was a tipping point for all of us when we
Yep.
said there's a better
The light
there's a
bulb
better
gotta be
way.
something better.
Yes,
That's right.
than what we're doing. Because for me, it was like, it's product. There's more to this than product. It has to be more
Yep.
to putting people first other than product.
And
Yeah.
before we talk about that tipping point, what pulled us into the more independent where we are now, let's talk about the elephant in the room in the sense of designations for financial advisors. Because
Mhm.
I feel like that's where clients are told, or investors, like, hey, make sure they're a CFP, make sure they're charter financial, make sure they know how to understand what a good mutual fund from a bad mutual fund, make sure they have schooling.
Yeah.
Now, we've all been in this business for a long time. We know a lot of advisors who have more designations. Like, we know one advisor that has more designations than the numbers of alphabet, like letters in the alphabet, right? How important is that to being truly a good advisor, knowing that we're going to be skewed and a little biased in how we're answering?
I think part of that is a measurement of, you've proven that you have the ability to take training and guidance and coaching. You've done the hard work, and now you can take that knowledge and apply it to the people that you're working with. But that's because you did a good job. You searched out that information for yourself. You proceeded to put in the time and the energy and the studies, and you've learned through consulting with other advisors, like you've said, that we can, quote unquote, discuss these ideas since we're not captive and develop our own thought process as to how is the best way I can serve my client.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Kevin?
That's a tough one, right? I don't know right now. So I gotta think about that.
So for me personally, like, I don't think a designation in and of itself is bad.
I let all my designations go. So I don't think they help you, because I don't think the client or the people we're talking to understand what all that means.
They just want to see it. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
they just
you're a
wanna see it.
CFP.
Yeah, like
oh, I
your
can trust
DO
you.
or your, the doctor, your DO or your MD, right?
Yep.
So they just want to see it. I don't know if it necessarily helped, because I come up from a fraternal company. So I was a fraternal insurance counselor. Nobody really cared about that, but I knew about it. I knew other things. I had other designations, but for me, it was like, I don't need that. I don't think I need that to really help people, because it's just the underlying test that I took, because you have to take a test, right?
That's all designations are. It's hey, I passed a test. I qualified because I did all of this stuff. I get this designation. And I don't think schooling is bad. I think schooling is good. But there is a disconnect, at least in our industry and probably a lot of other industries, where designations and licenses do not equate to the real world of planning. It's this fictitious, almost like, hey, and these idealistic scenarios, this is what you'd want to do. But who lives an idealistic life? Like, who is this model investor that has these, like, everybody that we sit down with, they're so unique. Now we can group them.
They all have a different story.
But everybody's got a story.
Right.
And how can you take the schooling and the planning? Now, you conceptually, sure, I'm all over it. But now you have this disconnect from book world to real world.
Right.
Yes.
And then how quickly it gets outdated with different products and how things work. And then it's all assuming you're planning the way you were taught and not necessarily planning a way according to what somebody needs. And those can be so different depending on who you're talking to. And it gets this massive web, and you're like, hey, I'm a CFP. I can handle all that. Well, no, you're a CFP. You did X amount of schooling on these types of scenarios. You're now dealing in these types of scenarios that doesn't even compute. Right?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah.
I think,
and I'm not killing
I think
it.
The idea of you hone that to your own personality and to your prospects through the education, training, and experience. I mean, for as long as the three of us have been in the business, if we had a mentor from day one, our careers may have advanced a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As an independent, whether you know it or not, you're the best of the best, because you have to be able to service all the clients up and down the ladder, not just the target or niche market.
And I will say, the last thing I'll say about this, we need to move on. When CFPs became super popular, I could almost point out a CFP the moment I walked into the room, because they walked around and like, well, I'm a CFP, and I'm like, oh, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you're not God's gift to financial planning. Like, you passed a test, right?
Yeah, well, you're book smart, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you're planning smart. You're book smart. So doesn't necessarily translate to the real world.
And here we are now, years later, and AI's taken off, and now this AI system, they're saying, hey, AI can beat all these other. So I'm not saying designations are bad. I'm just saying, if that can't be the only metric an investor uses to say, hey, I can trust this person, but I can't trust them because of the letters behind their name.
Correct.
All right, so let's move on to what we got to talk about the transition. Like, what pulled you out of the captive world, out of the world of Big Brother, Marble, the big money business, Ivory Tower, into small practice, boutique practice. What pulled you out?
Me, there was a better world out there. Once I got a taste or a sense that, hey, geez, there's, we have to sell this annuity, we have to sell this life insurance policy or whatever it is, But if the minute you looked outside that captive world, there was a whole different lineup or products, for lack of better words, that were better suited for your clients. And I thought, holy cow, I'm really doing a disservice because I'm limited to this, what I can do. But now I can go out there and really, I think, help people much better because there are better things out there.
Mm-hmm.
It was two things for me. The first being that where I came from, I was a senior manager at the time. I had a team of 20 agents, and we were doing really well in the captive world by those standards. But, it was 6 days a week, sun up to sundown. There was no rest. At the beginning of every month, my higher ups were always like, last month didn't matter. Why aren't you on the phone? Right? It was all about production. And something just started to click in me after a couple of years of that. Like, something's wrong. At the same time, I had some other friends on the outside who were, because we were dealing with Medicare recipients and at that time, and he was he was an engineer by trade, so that kind of a big brain. And he had developed this software that was helping these companies find inefficiencies in their healthcare designs. And I'm like, wow, he's really helping these companies save money and doing something in their health plans that are really helping them. I want to do something like that in the financial world. Like, there's people out there doing this. So that kind of set me off saying there's something better. That's what got me thinking to get outside of that captive world and go into independent.
And for me, every Friday we had to turn in a report. I don't know if you probably remember this, Bruce. Mm-hmm. And it was all about PC. And PC was potential commission. How much did you generate?
That means something different nowadays.
Yeah.
Showing your age there, buddy.
I know. How much did you generate for that agency, right? Mm-hmm. That was the bottom line. And then if you didn't do X amount of this, they frowned on it. If you didn't do X amount of this, they frowned on it. And I'm like, everybody doesn't fit in this neat little box.
Yeah.
It's different.
Neither did we.
Yes.
One of the great things about being an independent is that we do not have somebody telling us, other than our client, what is most important for them, what we can do, what we can't do, what's appropriate, whatever. It also presents a challenge on how we plan.
Yeah.
As an independent advisor, I've gone through several transitions on how I plan for my clients. So what's been your experience in the smaller sector of our business in the independent side? So, and to be clear on this, there's two major sides of our business. You have what's called the broker dealer. That's what we're calling Big Brother. These are the ivory towers of the world,
Mm-hmm.
The ones that you see on TV.
That's right.
And then you have these independent, which are called registered investment advisors, the independents, where they don't necessarily still take your money. They still use big ivory tower companies to hold it, but they're independent financial advisors all over the globe that are managing money without this big brother person saying, you do this. So they're not captive. They can go anywhere, sell anything at any time. Mm-hmm. But how do we, because that's us,
yep.
How did we learn to plan? Because we don't have a model to follow now. We have to make it up ourselves.
Yeah. For me, I had to deconstruct. The first thing I can remember going out is I'd already been trained to come into appointments with certain assumptions.
Yeah.
These products are great. We're going to go help these people, right? I had to stop and deconstruct my conversations first and learn how to ask different questions that pertain to them.
We learned how to
not
listen.
My presentation of what I wanted to tell them.
We learned how to listen to our clients.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And find out what
that took a minute.
What was truly important in their lives and not necessarily ours or the ivory towers.
Yeah.
I had, I joined a pretty decent size small business financial firm, and he had a process that we kind of made our own, or I kind of made my own. And the real turning point for me was in a meeting that I had. It was a very big client at the time for me. And we had a great rapport, and I felt like we really connected, and they ended up doing business. And I was really excited. It was like a big deal for me, like close this client on my own, I'm independent, I just didn't feel like I was qualified, but I was learning. And, or I was getting confident in my career. And then they called me like a week later and like, hey, stop everything. We don't want to move forward. And it crushed me. I was like, well, why? And I thought we're on the same page. Like, what's going on? And the client's like, well, we just don't get it. Like, we really like you. we don't really understand the plan and we don't see value in it. And I just remember being crushed. I went home, talked to my wife, and I'm like, I love our planning system, but they don't get it. So I just went to the drawing board and I'm like, hey, I'm just re-engineering or taking everything apart, what we do. And I'm trying to see it from their perspective. And just like you said, I'm listening to these people. And that was the beginning of what we now call simplicity, and understanding, what clients really need. And at the end of the day, I personally think they need to understand their problem. We call it the shortfall. But at that point, I didn't know what it was called. I just knew that selling assumptions, selling products
versus solving
or educating,
right.
And this is, a long time ago, but that was the beginning of change in my heart, in my life, and in my practice. We're like, hey, what the business teaches isn't what the clients want.
Right.
Because our industry, our business teaches product.
Correct.
You feel this way, feel being the optimal word there, buy this. You feel that way, buy that. It's not necessarily, hey, what do you need? What's your problem? Where do you want to go? Which we want to ask, but not necessarily that way.
Right.
And then how to solve those problems based on important bits of information. We weren't taught that.
No.
And it was really dissecting the client, which is interesting. You were not taught, no designation I know of, no schooling, no firm I've ever been a part of, or any conference I've been to has ever talked this way. It's always, here's what the industry, here's what the government, here's what the regulators care about, and here's how you need to do your business. Nobody's talking about the clients. They're just talking about, hey, stay out of trouble by doing this and sell that. And if the client feels this way, do this. If they feel that way, do that. Nobody's talking about what the client needs.
No.
Right.
And that you have to be on this side of the fence, at independence. And we're the guys that the industry loves to pick on, right? But it's the big brothers that's paying the billions and billions and billions of dollars in fines for doing anything wrong, but they don't get picked on. We get picked on because we're trying to fight for the client.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It stinks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was based on a lot of this too, is how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? So let's just say you said 7. So you build a portfolio built on 7.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic happens. What happens? Your risk just went down to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that's what drove me crazy. And that's what led me into the solving. Let's solve for because feelings, emotions change all the time. They don't have anything to do with planning.
So what's interesting, I wasn't even referring to that. What's interesting about this business is even though it's huge, it's still a very small knit community. And years ago, we all joined different small groups of advisors, study groups, whatever they were called. And I feel like by doing that, for me personally, I started to see how you did business, or another advisor. And I'm like, ooh,
yep.
I don't really care for how he does it or she does it, but man, he said a few things that really rocked my world. You gonna say something?
You get to pick the nuggets.
Yes.
The 2 takeaways or whatever,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And it just breathed life into so many different things. And then we started to create our own. And then we started to focus more on client needs, on serving and not selling.
Right.
And because our business, I feel like investors today, they have a hard job because they have to fight through an industry that's all about sales and products and find people that want to serve and care for them.
And they have Bernie Madoff in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now they don't only have the fear of the Madoff, they have the excitement of, hey, some computer brain is going to now tell me how to manage my money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have this hope like, hey, just in a couple months or a couple years, they're going to figure this out and we're all going to be rich and I don't need anybody. And that's probably scarier than the Bernie Madoff, because who's to say that there's not going to be people behind that just manipulating everything.
Yeah.
Right.
At the end of the day, for me, like when I go to a doctor, I don't want some robot or some computer system, like they're going to punch in all this
Diagnosing
information,
you.
but like, okay, the computer tells me I've got X, take these 2 and see me in the morning.
Right.
I want somebody that knows me, that cares about me, that whether they might make mistakes, but at the end of the day, they care about my well-being, and in our space, I still feel people want that, but they have a tall task to find the advisor they can care and trust that cares and trusts about them. That is also a very good financial advisor. Cause I would say we cared and trusted, or we cared about our clients long before we knew how to do our job very well.
Yes.
And, we try to do our best, but I don't think we've always given the best advice because we've grown in our ability to be good advisors. And you look back, I'm like, man, I'm glad I went through that, but I wish I would have never made that recommendation.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we've morphed from being in an environment in the industry that was company centric to, through our own education and searching among independent study groups, to become client centric.
Yeah.
And that evolution in many cases has taken greater than 40 or 45 or 50 years for the industry to start turning.
Yeah.
So maybe we got lucky and learned a little earlier than most of them.
I don't know. I'm just fortunate where we are right now. So let's give some really good advice to financial advisors and clients alike. And let's talk about let's talk specifically first to the advisor. How does an advisor become a really good, awesome advisor at what they do? Like, what advice would you give to an advisor? How would you help them grow in their practice?
Number one, stay teachable. And so much ego in this industry.
Yeah.
No.
Understatement of the year. Stay humble and be willing to take pieces from other advisors. Even if they haven't been in the industry as long as you, they might still have something, a piece of wisdom or something they've learned that could be helpful to your practice. Stay open and teachable, always. Never stop learning.
I call it always be on the hunt.
Yeah.
You're hunting for what's...
Say, what are you hunting for here, buddy?
You're hunting for more information, so you become a better advisor. You want to be, all of those things that go along with it. Just like you said, Ryan, I want this piece of nugget here. Or Bruce, you said, I want this piece of nugget.
Yeah.
This piece of nugget. And then all of a sudden you take all these nuggets, you put them in the pile, you melt them down and make them your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big transition point for me along the way.
I think you excel at that.
Yeah.
Being able to pick and choose what works in your style,
yeah,
with your client base, and really help them learn and grow.
And then you're willing to share it with others, because there's a lot of times in practice, no, I have the secret sauce. I'm not going to share it with anybody, right?
Yeah.
No, but it's just great. We can, no. Here's best practices, share alike, and.
I think for me, one of the truths of being a financial advisor or being in a service business is that we want to provide for our family.
Yeah.
We want to make good living. And sometimes for certain people or for all of us, that can cloud judgment. And if I were to give any advisor advice, it would be that you have to stop selling and start serving.
Yeah.
And I tell that to advisors all the time as we coach and train other advisors, that this business is more about serving people than it is about selling to an investor. It's not about the products. It's about the process. It's about helping people get to a point where they can own and understand, not necessarily in that order, understand and own their problems and know what solutions and strategies fix their problems and take ownership of that. So we're more of a guide than we are a recommendation source. So we don't want to just say, hey, here's your problem, take 2 of these or buy these and you're good. It's no, hey, this is a subjective business. You have a problem that's ever evolving, and these solutions and market products are ever changing. We just need to make sure that your problem and these solutions, we're always staying on top of them, and we're looking at that through the lens of an unbiased view where we're more like professors and teachers than we are like product salesmen.
Yep,
correct.
Where we can just give the hard truth, like, hey, if you're going to use this strategy, this is probably going to be the outcome. If you're going to do that strategy or this product, this is probably going to be the outcome. You understand all these different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
You want to show it all.
Right.
You don't want to hold anything back. Show them everything that you can and educate.
For a new advisor, my advice would be start serving and you'll never have to sell again.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about the clients, investors. What's some good advice that you can leave them with, you know, as they have this tall task? They have real people who are trying to provide for their families, who sometimes are at that crossroad of, hey, this is good advice, but this pays me more, you know, or sometimes like, you know, I really want to help them, but I got to serve this client because he pays me more or what. I'm like, this is real world. Like this happens. How do you help them find the right advisor that's going to take care of them, care for them, and give good advice? What would you say to them? Everybody's pointing to you, man. You must have all the answers there, Ryan.
Well, no, I don't.
Here, I'll give you. I think we should lead with some nuggets. If you walk into an advisor's office and you see awards all over the walls, if you see president's trophies and trips to all over with you know the designations on their chest and they're just bragging about, hey, consecutive years of whatever.
Yeah.
Take that as a red flag that there might be some ulterior motive behind, and that's far. It's not as popular these days as it was in the past.
Yeah.
But whenever I'd walk into an advisor's office that we're coaching or we're thinking about onboarding, and I see all that, I'm like, nope, you're not the right fit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or if it's always a product, right? If you're going to an advisor,
and every solution
is a product.
Yeah.
There's no education behind it. It's this product fixes everything. That's a big red flag. A big red flag.
Yeah.
And actually, to zoom out from that, another nugget behind that would be if you don't understand if you don't understand your problem and or what fixes the problem, get out.
Yep.
If they're not even doing planning, and that's the hard part, like 401ks, investments, product, those aren't plans. Those are things. Right. Like an IRA is not a plan. A 401k or a pension is not a plan. And we know this because we hear it all the time. A plan is something that helps you understand, like I would liken it to a game plan, right? If you're a coach, you put together a game plan. It's not like the coach goes, hey, I got players, we're good. He's like, no. The coach of the other team, they're going to be doing all of this stuff. You know, this strategy, this is typically how they play the game. So we're going to do this to counter it so we can play better. Like that's a game plan. That's understanding here's their strengths, here's our weaknesses, here's how they can hurt us. Like diagnosing the situation, like that's important. You got to do that financially. Like where are you today? Where do you want to be tomorrow? And how you're going to get there and what's going to get in your way. That's what we do as a planner. You want your financial advisor to do the exact same thing and serve you by educating.
Yeah.
You got to talk about products. At the end of the day, you're going to end up buying some kind of investment. You have to use
something, yes.
So, but that can't be like the pitch. There shouldn't be a pitch.
Right.
No sweaty palms on the tables. No like, hey, do you want to buy this? It should be, do you understand this? Do you know what could go wrong? Like all of this, like this isn't going to work if you do that, or this is the result if you do something else. Like that's what we're kind of getting at here. What else are we missing?
I think sometimes too, from a client's perspective, after meeting with someone like us or another advisor, do they feel like they were known or heard themselves?
Yeah.
Say that.
Do they feel known?
Like the client, the investor.
Mm-hmm.
Do they feel that we've paid attention enough to their products, not looking at their watch every time something goes off? Yep. Not being distracted over here.
Yep.
Really,
what would be an easy way of doing that?
From an advisor standpoint?
No, from an investor standpoint, what would be the gauge? I have a simple trick.
I think if you can have the initial meeting and ask the client, how do you feel about what we've discussed? Does that seem to solve your primary goal or problem that you felt you were facing? Do you understand how this will help you? And if they can say, pretty much so, but it's still a lot of information, then we know that they've gotten a bite of the apple and they're probably interested in finding out how to finish it. And that's where our knowledge and experience comes into play. Say, well, let's just review it. take a break, and we can reconvene in a week or two or whenever it's convenient for you. And that takes all the threat out of the world on their part.
I would say for me, going back to what you brought up about feeling heard, it's very similar to what you're talking about. It's how much are you talking versus how much are they talking?
But if you have a product and you don't know how it fixes your problem, run, right? Because you have to know, we call it shortfall. You have to know how to solve your shortfall. How are you going to pick investments to fill that shortfall so you don't run out of money between here and the next 20 or 30 years? You have to understand how, number one, what your problem is, your shortfall. Number two, we need to solve it. What rate of return do you need to earn between here and age 95? And number three, what investments fit in there so you don't get in trouble down the road? If you can answer those three questions, I think you're probably sitting with the advisor who's got your best interest at heart.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Well spoken.
Any final thoughts?
Don't give up. If you're in a position to where you, as Lou Ferrario used to say, the Italian, if you don't got good canunge, which means your stomach is telling you run, follow it, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say be patient.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no rush. The market goes crazy, the economy's crazy, and things happen, but there's no immediate need to get things done right away.
Right.
Take your time.
That's right.
If you're feeling pressured, you got to do it today because this is only good for 30 days.
Not good.
Oh,
Not
heck
good.
no.
Not good.
Run.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, all right, guys. Well, thanks. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. We're actually in the middle of one of our study groups, so we can learn as iron sharpens iron. I feel like we are sharpening each other, all for our clients' benefit. I just appreciate you guys, and I'm glad we were able to do this.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
We'll do it again.
Paul.